Hip-hop has always been more than just music. It's a movement, a lifestyle, and for many, a battlefield where reputations are built, destroyed, and remembered forever. Among the pioneers who carved their names into the foundation of this culture, two women stand out as undeniable icons, MC Lyte and Queen Latifah. Both women rose to fame at a time when the industry was overwhelmingly dominated by men, yet they managed to not only survive, but thrive, creating legacies that are still talked about decades later. But behind the glossy magazine covers, the empowering anthems, and the iconic collaborations, there's a side of this story that most fans never got to see. And now, years later, MC Lyte is finally opening up about the role Queen Latifah allegedly played in sabotaging her career. A revelation that has shocked old-school hip-hop fans and forced many to look at these legends in a completely different light. To understand why this revelation hits so hard, you first need to understand the space MC Lyte occupied in hip-hop. She wasn't just another rapper, she was the first female MC to release a full solo album, breaking barriers at a time when women were expected to stand behind the men in the industry, not beside them. Her debut, Light as a Rock, set the tone for everything that came after. She had bars, presence, and a style that demanded respect. Light represented Brooklyn, raw and unfiltered, and she became a blueprint for every female rapper that followed. Nicki Minaj, Remy Ma, Eve, and countless others have acknowledged her as a major influence. But with influence and power often comes conflict, and that's where Queen Latifah's name enters the story. Latifah emerged around the same era, but she came with a completely different energy. Where MC Lyte embodied gritty lyricism and street authenticity, Latifah leaned into Afrocentric empowerment, jazz influences, and crossover appeal. Her image was polished, her voice commanding, and her ambitions stretched far beyond the mic. She wanted Hollywood, TV, endorsements, and mainstream respectability. In many ways, these two queens represented opposite sides of the same coin. Lyte was the purist, Latifah the strategist. And for a while, fans loved them both equally, celebrating the rise of women in hip-hop. But behind the scenes, the competition was much more intense than most realized. What MC Lyte has now revealed is that this competition didn't just exist in the charts or the press. It played out in ways that directly impacted her career opportunities. According to her, Latifah wasn't just a fellow artist, she became an obstacle. Lyte has claimed that there were moments when industry doors mysteriously closed on her, deals suddenly fell through, and collaborations that were set in motion got canceled at the last minute. At first, she thought it was bad luck or industry politics, but over time the pattern became too consistent to ignore. And in interviews and recent conversations, Lyte has suggested that Latifah, armed with her growing influence, business savvy, and network, wasn't just competing. She was actively blocking Lyte from advancing to the next level. Now, this might sound like a shocking accusation, but when you look at how their careers diverged, the pieces start to fit. By the mid-90s, Latifah had already made her way into acting, scoring roles in films and eventually leading Living Single, one of the most iconic sitcoms of the era. She was becoming a household name far beyond hip-hop. Meanwhile, MC Lyte's momentum seemed to stall. Despite her undeniable talent and pioneering role, she never reached the same level of mainstream stardom. And fans always wondered why. Lyte herself has admitted that she couldn't understand why doors that should have opened for her remained shut, even though she had the credentials, respect, and fan base to back it up. The industry seemed to favor Latifah, and Lyte has implied that wasn't just coincidence, it was calculated. What makes this even more complicated is the fact that, publicly, the two women always maintained a sense of unity. They collaborated on empowering movements, spoke on women's equality, and were often pictured together at events celebrating female excellence. To the outside world, it looked like hip-hop sisterhood at its finest. But as Lyte has now pointed out, that unity wasn't always genuine. Behind the smiles and photo ops, there was tension, and that tension left her feeling isolated in an industry she helped build. Fans are now questioning how many opportunities Lyte missed out on because someone more powerful was pulling strings behind the scenes. Some insiders have even claimed that Latifah's team worked aggressively to position her as the face of female hip-hop, often at the expense of others. It's not uncommon in the music industry for managers, labels, and PR machines to pit artists against each other, and sometimes the artists themselves lean into that game to secure dominance. For Latifah, establishing herself as the queen meant eliminating competition, and according to Lyte, she became collateral damage in that process. Imagine being one of the most respected lyricists of your generation, only to find your legacy overshadowed not because of lack of talent, but because someone else had the power to rewrite the narrative. That's the painful reality Lyte has hinted at. And the truth is, Lyte's story is not unique in hip-hop. The industry is full of tales where one artist's rise coincided with another's downfall. But what makes this case stand out is the fact that both women were supposed to represent unity, strength, and sisterhood in a male-dominated space. The idea that Latifah may have contributed to the derailment of Lyte's trajectory feels like a betrayal not just to her, but to the culture as a whole. Hip-hop fans looked up to these women as proof that there was room for more than one female voice, yet behind the scenes, the reality was far more cutthroat. Of course, some fans argue that Lyte might be exaggerating or misinterpreting what happened. They say Latifah was simply more business-minded, more versatile, and willing to diversify her career. Lyte stayed true to the streets, while Latifah played the long game. Maybe it wasn't sabotage. Maybe it was just strategy. But even if that's true, the effect was the same. One legend soared while another was quietly pushed aside. And the fact that Lyte is finally speaking out suggests the wounds never really healed. Today, when we look back at hip-hop history, MC Lyte's contributions are undeniable. She broke ground for women in a way that few others did, and her music remains timeless. But her story also serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when power, ambition, and competition collide. Queen Latifah is now a global superstar, an award-winning actress, a talk show host, and a cultural icon. MC Lyte is revered by hip-hop purists, but often overlooked by the mainstream audience that should have celebrated her just as loudly. And if what Lyte is saying is true, that imbalance wasn't accidental. It was engineered. As fans, this revelation forces us to ask hard questions. How many other careers were quietly derailed behind the scenes? How many legends never got their flowers because someone else was working to keep them in the shadows? And most importantly, what does this say about the true nature of sisterhood in an industry that thrives on competition? One thing is for sure, MC Lyte breaking her silence has reignited conversations that many thought were buried. It has reminded fans of her rightful place in hip-hop history while sparking a debate about the cost of ambition. Whether you believe Latifah deliberately destroyed her career or not, the fact that Lyte feels compelled to tell this story proves just how deep the scars run. And for hip-hop lovers, it's a bittersweet reminder that behind every anthem we grew up on, there's a human story filled with struggles, rivalries, and painful truths.